Today I'd like to introduce you to Lucas, who's going to be talking with me about mission and strategy. We've been talking about not-for-profits and charities. Do you think that the same is true for for-profit businesses?
You know, that's a really good question. I've never worked for a for-profit business. So I've worked in the international development sector, in East Timor, I've worked in government, and I've worked in NGO sector. But I talk to other people who work, colleagues who work in the private sector, and I think the same thing applies. Because even in for-profit organizations where mission, you could argue, is so important, the focus can go to money.
Yes.
How are we going to, fundraise? How are we going to ensure we have enough funds to sustain what we do? All of a sudden, that's where the focus can be. Same thing in a private firm, right? I mean, that's a more direct focus.
Yes.
We're here to generate profit.
Yes.
But ultimately, no real organization is ultimately here to generate profit.
No.
Profit is a byproduct of a service that you provide, hopefully to provide some benefit to humanity.
A mission.
A mission, right? Like you might be to produce vehicles that transport people around the place in an environmentally friendly manner.
Yes.
Or in a fun manner, whatever it is, right?
Yes.
But you're here to offer something to the world that's attractive. And that's your mission, right? If you lose sight of that and you start going, oh, well, how are we going to increase our share price, or how are we going to increase our profit, or next month, and that becomes your prism, you will then start to chase things again to achieve those KPIs, and you've lost sense of who are we. And when you do that, ultimately your financial results will suffer, but also the motivation of your people will suffer, because nobody really ultimately is deeply fulfilled and deeply motivated by simply dollars and cents. We all know that it's an important consideration and inspires us, but ultimately it's not what really drives people to give 110%.
And I think the other interesting thing too is that when any organization gets caught up in the search for the dollars and misses out on or ignores the mission, what happens is that within 1, 2, 3, sometimes 5 years, as you say, the profits have fallen away because they're not delivering that service. And the customers signed up for whatever that was, that mission of delivering something. The staff joined the company because they wanted to contribute to the mission. It can take time for it to disappear, but they're definitely connected.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. And I think the excellent point that you make there, Dominic, is that it can be very subtle. And over time. And it can also be quite sudden. For example, all of a sudden you have a shortfall of your funds, and all of your attention can immediately go to financials, right? Which is necessary. But as long as we don't start chasing things that are going to take us down the wrong direction.
So in terms of people within an organization and trying to get their involvement or their engagement with the mission and with the strategy, have you got any thoughts on how you can best do that? For example, say a senior manager has been given a strategy from on high, or the mission has been rejigged. How do you actually adapt in those circumstances?
So do you mean how to sort of make it real and meaningful to people?
Exactly.
Okay. One of the things is giving it the time that it needs. So creating a space that allows people to actually give that some thought and reflection. Because sometimes some organizations will be like, this is really important, we've got to talk about and think about our mission. But all of you still got to have your same workload and your same KPIs, and all the other deadlines have to be made within the next month. But I'm expecting this on top of it. So inevitably what will happen is people will just prioritize the things that they've got to do today and tomorrow. KPIs. So the first thing to do is create some space. Pick a time of the year that enables people to have a little bit more chance to go, to try to create a setting that takes them away. Maybe go to offsite, somewhere a little bit different to where you normally are. It could be somewhere in a like a hotel. It could be nature somewhere, some retreat place, somewhere where the mind can get away from the nitty gritty. And then give it the time that it needs. Don't try to do it all in one session, because there's only so much that people can, take on in one go. And I just had this learning just now when we were going through this process in my current workplace. Was the value wasn't so much in the outcome, in the crafting of this wonderful statement, It was in the process, in the kind of the nitty gritty, grappling with one another. What do we mean by that? When we say that, what do I mean? What do you mean? Is that really, what we're on about? And somebody will say, yes, that's what we're on about. And someone says, well, I don't think so. It's in that kind of what you might call messiness. But the key thing is having somebody to facilitate that, right? So allowing that messiness or that kind of confusion to be there, but then having a process and a skilled facilitator in place that can draw that out, allow to hear the deeper thing of what people are saying, and then bring out some kind of commonality that brings people to sort of a clearer place eventually. But you must allow that kind of interaction and debate to happen, because that's where people crystallize not only what their own thoughts are, but understanding what other people's thoughts are. And only when you go through that do you come out the other end with a shared understanding, and then also a shared sense of unity around that. So I would stage it over a period of time, give people a chance, maybe a couple of weeks, come back again, over a period of maybe 2 to 3 months, to be able to complete that process, and then make sure you don't forget to revisit it once you've got it in place.
I think that's such an important point that you raised, because in a sense what you're trying to do is create shared meaning and shared, and I suppose we'd call it engagement, with the mission, which really only happens when people grapple with it themselves and what does it mean to them. So the wordsmithing in a sense doesn't matter as much as the engagement of people in the process of understanding and dialoguing around it.
That's right. Because if you just read a statement, even like if I read a statement, I might look at it and go, I conceptually know what that means. Like if talk about break the cycle of poverty, I know what that means in my head. But what you might think about it in your head is different. But if I've been part of a team or organizational or business-wide discussion about it, and I've heard what you think of that and what I've got in my head when I say that, all of a sudden I come out the end and going, I have a different picture in my mind of what this means and how I feel about that statement. Right?
And probably it's now a shared meaning that was probably different from my own individual meaning.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But it's also shared with others who have a similar understanding. Which I think comes back to your point about at least trying to do it once a year, because some people have left and the people who've arrived haven't gone through that process. I mean, organizations often say, here's the mission statement, and expect those people to have exactly the same commitment that everyone else does.
Exactly. That's a very good point. New people are coming in, and every single person that's connected makes a big difference. And if even 1 or 2 people are not connected, it can lead to tension in teams, right? Because somebody comes in and has got a great idea, and they're thinking, well, this is going to be a wonderful idea, and someone else has got a wonderful idea, and all of a sudden it's almost like you're having parallel conversations because your foundation is not the same. So how do you then make decisions when somebody says, I've got a great idea that could be successful, that make a difference to people's lives and generate money, and someone else goes, I've got another idea. Which one do we go with? Whereas if you have an agreed sense of what our mission is, it gives you a language and a foundation, at least on which to be able to meet. And then, as we said earlier, when you've done that, you then set certain priorities and KPIs based on that shared understanding of mission. And all of a sudden, you've got a consistent way of going, well, let's test our ideas against these parameters, against our mission. And so therefore it can alleviate a lot of potential conflict or disagreement or different ways of deciding things when you have those fundamentals in place.
Yes, indeed. Because I think people are so reluctant to take the time because everyone's busy, and that's understandable, but actually you're saving yourself time down the track, because that way you don't have to spend so long on each decision because everyone's on board and you know the criteria that are going to be used.
It's that old kind of fallacy in life is, I think the faster that I run, the better off I'll be, when sometimes you just need to take that breather and make it much more efficient and effective.
That's been very helpful, Lucas. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or contribute about strategy and mission? It's such a big topic, I know. There's so many things you could cover.
In our workplaces, so many people get burned out.
Yeah.
And it can happen two ways, you know, like sometimes it can be, people can feel pushed, you know, yes, towards it. And normally the good thing is that when people have a personal connection with a mission, then they generally want to, they're motivated, right? So that's one of the big advantages, is that people will go, and Simon Sinek talks about this, you know, yes, even though mission isn't, you might say, technically your why, yeah, but it goes to the heart of your why. Yeah. You know, as soon as you start talking about mission, you will start talking and thinking about, why do I do what I do? Yeah. And when you grasp that, you're going to want to give your all. So in a sense, it's so worthwhile, because you're going to have your team want to do things. Yes. They're going to be happier. You, yes, have a happier workforce that wants to do the things that you're working on, rather than doing it because they're going through the motions, or yes, because they feel like, I've got my KPIs to achieve, and if I don't, then I'll be sacked. You know, it's actually leads to people being happier in the office. Yeah. And therefore people going home happier. Yeah. The only caveat that I would add to that is that sometimes you've got to be careful, because in some organizations that attract people who are very mission driven, yes, is that you can also lead to burnout. Yeah. You know, where people give their all, yeah, to the point where they lose a sense of, am I taking care of myself? Yes. And other people and other things in my life. So I'd say, yeah, sometimes when you can also put your organizational mission, yes, too close to the heart of who you are, yes, as an individual, yes, and lose sense of what else is important in my life. Yeah, yeah. So it's very important to kind of go, well, what's my, as connecting back to my individual, yes, conversation of who am I, why do I exist, and what's important for me. Yes. That's an important question for each individual to ask. Yeah, absolutely. So that then my organizational kind of mission also, yeah, sits within my own sets of priorities and values as a, yeah, person. Yeah. To keep our lives in balance. Yeah. Does that make sense? It makes a lot of sense.
I just thought of something else while you were talking, actually. The mission and strategy implementation, using your point about the why. So if the mission is the why, like, why are we doing this? The strategy is like, which avenue are we going to take to do that? And each manager then at the next level does okay, so what are we going to do? And then people individually say, how am I going to do that? So I really like that sort of why, which, what, how, because it's much more memorable.
Yeah. I think that's very helpful. I think always relating each of these concepts, when we talk about vision, mission, yes, you know, purpose, yes, I always find it so much simpler when we go back to the, you know, the why, the what, the where, when, and how. Yeah. Like, because everybody kind of understands that. Yeah, and in essence, that's what each one of those is really getting at. Yeah. So it's probably a really nice way to summarize it, as you said. And look, somebody might disagree with you conceptually and say, oh, well, you know, I think, yeah, one is more like this. But if it makes sense to you, yeah, that's right, and you can apply that in your own business, yeah, go for it. Yeah. Because there's nothing worse than kind of going on the internet and Googling, saying, what does this person say mission is? What does this person say vision, yeah, is? And getting all confused about it.
That's so true.
As long as it makes sense to you and it works, go for it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Dominic. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about something that's so important.